Hi, this is Emily,
And this is Helen.
presenting you
Hello Audio,
where every 2 weeks,
we are showing you the best entrepreneurs for music, audio, and tech.
and a huge thanks to Leo, who's producing this podcast for us.
Welcome to our first episode today.
Hello Audio by the Venue Berlin.
Hello everyone and welcome to the Venue Berlin's podcast. Today I'm joined by Melodrive, Valerio and Andy, who are gonna tell me a bit more about their startup that is also sitting in our venue and who are hosting tonight's after work session. I'm really looking forward to this. Valerio, do you wanna maybe tell me a bit more about Melodrive? What is your startup and what are you actually doing and trying to achieve?
Yeah, sure, Helen. So thank you very much for having in this podcast. And so at Melodrive, we are building an artificial intelligence composer that can create music for immersive media like virtual reality, augmented reality, and video games. So the idea is to have people that can create music with the help of artificial intelligence to create soundtracks that are highly immersive for like nonlinear media, like video games.
Cool. Where else would you use it? Can you give us some more use cases about where would you use an AI composer?
Yes, for sure. So there are like many startups right now that are using artificial intelligence for creating music, but many of them, or if not like all of them, are focusing on like songs and linear music. So the idea is that they try to replace composers and songwriters with artificial intelligence. For us, this is not the right way to go. So rather, we would focus on enhancing composer and enhancing like normal users so that they can create something that they cannot do just like right now. So music for like video games where the music is non-linear, and so you may need help with the AI to create something which is just like impossible to create today, just like real-time music generation. And the same thing with users as well that have no musical skills. And in this case, we provide them like with a tool through which they can just like create very immersive music in a kind of very smooth way.
So you just said that it helps people who might not be able to do music themselves, but is there any chance that it can also support human musicians, or would it rather be a threat for them? How do you see that topic? I think lots of people right now are a bit afraid of that and are very unsure how to react to it or how to deal with it.
Yeah, well, with all new technologies, there's always a bit of skepticism and a little bit of fear that creeps in. And I guess when you think about artificial intelligence, you hear all these famous people saying, you know, you should be afraid of what artificial intelligence can do. And I guess as an artist, you would like feel some of that fear. You know, the question is, you know, is this going to replace me? Is this going to take my job? And when you think, though, about making music that's truly non-linear. So a player in a VR experience has their own sense of agency. They can choose where to go and what to do, and they can change that at any moment. If you were to compose by hand all of the different situations that they could perhaps change their mind, go in this direction, go in that direction, the amount of combinations is basically infinite. So what we do, and in the future, what we hope to be able to do with composers as well is to enable them to write some musical material, input that into the system, and then our system can take it from there, essentially, and create these infinite variations and these infinite possibilities, essentially creating artificial intelligence version of themselves. And the composers that we've talked to who are in interactive media get super excited about that, when they realize the potential there, because this is something that really frustrates them. It's a big problem in their current job. It's a lot of work that they have to do to create all these different cues and different transitions, and we can take care of that for them.
So you'd rather say that is a collaboration instead of a fear or a proper competitor for human musicians?
Absolutely. I mean, our aim is to basically create a new way of creating music, a new kind of music altogether, that isn't possible today without the help of artificial intelligence. So we really see it as an exciting opportunity for musicians to explore.
Well, that does sound really advanced. Maybe you can give us some more background on yourselves and how you came up with that idea and why you're the ones who are able to create this.
Sure. Well, myself, I'm a PhD in machine learning and music. And actually, Valerio and I met when we were doing our PhDs. So Valerio has a PhD in music and AI. Before that, I was actually a games developer. And we're both also musicians. So Valerio is a trained concert pianist and conductor, whereas I'm from more of electronic and rock music background. When we met, we instantly connected. We had this idea that after we finish our PhDs, we'd try to create something in this space, in this music creation with AI space. For me, it was such a natural thing to think about games, because in games you have this amazing opportunity, you have this very highly advanced simulation that's running on very advanced hardware. And we can really tap into a lot of stuff that's happening in the game and change the music that in ways that haven't been done before. And for me, that was the thing that was really, really exciting. Anything to add on that?
I think you got a third founder.
Yeah, we have a third founder, Ryan Groves, and he also has a background in music and artificial intelligence. So he did a master's in music tech, and he worked in the industry for quite some time as director of research and development in a music tech startup. So he comes more like from a kind of industry background, whereas we come from more like an academic background, and all the three of us get along very well together because of our passion for music tech and also video games.
That sounds like a nice little love story there. And also you just brought us some examples of your work that you're currently doing, so we would like to listen to that now.
Okay, so there we had an example of our ambient style. And in the ambient style, the composer is really doing lots of things with drones and slow moving forms. So the melody there that we have is a lot more sparse. And then also what you heard is a change in emotion from happy to sad partway through. And lots of stuff changed in the music. Some things you might have recognized, like for instance, the tempo changed very subtly. The tempo got a lot slower. And also there was more sort of detune kind of effects going on in the synth parts and things like that. But also there's a lot more stuff that's happening compositionally in the system. So for instance, we might change key into one of the minor modes or something like that.
Let's listen to the piano example then.
Yeah, so there we had an example of our piano style. And actually comparing that with the ambient style, there's a far more minimal style to do something like an emotional change, because we only have one instrument that we're playing with, which is the piano. However, we heard another emotional change again, going from happy to sad. So one of the things you can play with as a performer on the piano is like the velocity that you're playing the notes on. So how harsh are you actually hitting the keys on the piano? And so that's one of the things that that you heard in that example. As we went from happy to sad, the music became softer in terms of the velocities.
All right, that all sounded really different so far. So let's check out your last example, the techno vibe.
Here we have an example of our of a style which we call house music, and in this we're actually doing a different emotional change. So we're moving from an emotion called tender to an emotion to an angry state, an angry emotion. And here again, you know, with house music, we have a lot more things that we can play with. So we have things like it's a synthesized electronic musical style. So we can play with synthesized parameters like the filter cutoff. But also we are adding things like something called vertical layering in adaptive music, which is essentially adding more stems on top of each other in the track. So for instance, you know, in the tender emotion, we have just the kick playing with a pad. And then as we move towards angry, we bring in some other percussion, we bring in a second pad, and also the filters open up to create a harsher, more angry sound.
That's great. That's really interesting, actually. I really like the ambient one. I feel like that's quite advanced now. So what are your next steps and what are you trying to achieve within the next couple of months?
Yeah, so basically for us, now that we have an initial release of the products, and it's time for like people to start playing around with it and to just like have it out in the wild and having like developers and people, as I said, like experimenting with it. And specifically now we are aiming at having a few portfolio projects with very high profile content developers, VR artists, game developers. And the idea is to give them like this tool and so that they can play around with it and see like what they can come out with. And also like with these portfolio projects, we'll be able to showcase the potential of Melodrive to other customers and like digital platforms that are our actual target. And I wanted to mention that among like these prestigious people we are collaborating with, there's also a person who won an Oscar for Best Visual Effects in 1999, I believe. And he's an amazing like artist, all-around artist that has worked like in Hollywood for a very long time, and now he's just like started working in VR.
Wow. And he's supporting you guys?
Yeah, he's supporting us, and I think like he really likes this idea of like music that can adapt, because he's working on some of like artistic installations in virtual reality, and like these installations, so you have like these kind of abstract shapes that evolve like a kind of biosculptures. And I think what he really finds like enticing about Melodrive is that the music adapts, and we could create some kind of a relationship between how like those sculptures adapt and how the music adapts, so that you can create an experience which is very immersive, not only at the visual level, but also like with the audio feedback.
Very curious to get to see that at one point. When we talk about different people that you're working with, I would also be very interested in people that you're not working with, like your competitors. Are there a lot of challenges and competitions around here in this topic? I think you said before that right now it's of course a topic everyone is talking about. So what are they focusing on and why are you sticking out?
Yeah. So as I was mentioning earlier, there are a number of generative music startups out there. One is JukeTech, another one is Amper Music, Ivo Technologies, Popgun. But the thing really is that they are focusing mainly on linear music. So it's a little bit like using AI for replacing like songwriters and having like a cheap and quick replacement for like the work of the composers. Whereas for us, it's way more advanced. So we really have this vision where we see a world where AI and humans will collaborate together to create this music, which is like highly adaptive and music that cannot just be done right now, as Andy was explaining a little bit earlier. So overall, I would say that there's a lot of hype like around AI music. But most of these companies are just focusing on linear music. So in this sense, we are quite unique because we are the only ones that are thinking of using AI for tackling a very hard problem, which is like music in real time and music for non-linear media.
There's one thing I'd like to add to that, which is that Google are actually looking into this area, and they're also doing.
And you're looking for investments.
Yeah, we are. But what I was going to say is one of the really exciting things I think that they're doing is they're looking at using AI for sound production as well as composition. So they have a new kind of hardware synthesizer called the NSynth, which is actually running a neural network in the background doing synthesis, and you can morph between lots of different sounds. This is an area where I think that AI is really contributing something exciting and new to the field of music, and we can see this as well happening with other kind of tools, and hopefully there'll be more and more of these kind of instruments, tools for aided assisted composition, helping you with your mastering, helping you basically make your job easier as a music producer. Can
you tell us a bit more about the process, about how can you teach AI to produce music? How does that work? Is it easy to explain, or do you even want to say anything about it, or is it all a big secret?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's such a secret, because for us, we're really trying to think about the way that we compose music as humans, because we've been doing this for a long time. We're trying to think about, okay, what's the process that a composer goes through? If I'm thinking about writing a sad piece of music, what do I do first? Maybe I come up with a musical idea. Maybe it's just a simple melody or a set of chords, and then I elaborate on that. I add more parts. Maybe I make it more stylized to fit certain musical genres. Then I can start thinking about the sound design. Is this going to be played on a full symphonic orchestra? Is this going to be played with a rock band? Or these kind of sound design decisions, which form part of our AI process. And then of course there's a feedback loop that goes along all the time. How does the sound design affect the composition choices? How does the composition choices affect the sound design? And then also, how does the user contribute, and how does the musician, the video game music composer, contribute? So it is kind of like a very complex bunch of different things. But essentially what we do is we look at some music theory, we use some machine learning techniques, we use some of our own expertise in music theory to try to get to the root of what makes up a musical style. And from a user's point of view, that's what they're working with. They're working with this idea of style. So, we have this rock music style, this ambient music style, and these different styles inform our system and the way that our system composes. And we use different kinds of techniques in these different styles to actually compose the music. One of the really interesting challenges for us is this extra emotional layer that we have as well. So you have style, and then you also have emotion. So what does happy rock music sound like versus sad rock music? How does that affect the composition and the sound design? And then also, if you're changing things constantly in real time, then how can we intelligently know how we can get from happy to sad and make it make compositional sense. You know?
So are you gonna try to add more clusters to your emotions in the future? I think right now you got 4 emotional patterns: happy, sad, angry, and tender.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, we picked those 4 for now to focus on at first because they're really very different emotions. But for sure, we're going to be adding a lot more different, very subtle emotions. Certain emotions as well, certain feelings can be linked to styles as well. We have this idea of creating more like a vibe. If you have a bunch of emotions and maybe a bunch of musical styles and how they bleed into each other and make it really truly adaptive. So there's some really exciting things on the horizon for that.
How do you cluster emotions? How do you do special research on emotions?
Yeah, we conduct some of our own research on how listening to music can affect your emotional states, things like your immersion in an interactive experience. But we also rely a lot on, there's a bunch of research that exists out there on music and emotion from like a music cognition point of view, from a psychological point of view, and also from just a pure acoustics point of view. You know, how does a certain timbre make you feel? This is something that's been well studied in classical music or in even film music today. A lot of film music composers use a lot of these techniques and tricks of the trade to make sure that, you know, they instill the right kind of feeling in their listener. So we can rely a lot on that previous research, but there's a lot of unanswered questions. And also, when you think about the idea of real time, then the challenge becomes a lot more complex.
So I guess that might be also a reason why you're planning a hackathon on emotions.
That's right. Yeah. Thank you for mentioning that. We are indeed. So we ran one hackathon. It's called Emo Jam. We ran one in San Francisco in the Bay Area. And it was a big success. The idea is essentially to bring together a bunch of experts in interactive media, so virtual reality, augmented reality, and music, and any kind of AI and emotional related field. Bring them all together and have a 24-hour hack and try to create something with feeling, you know. And the first one was such a huge success, we thought, why not try and do a second one here in our spiritual home.
In the capital of music tech.
The capital of music tech, Berlin. The venue Berlin.
The venue Berlin,
indeed.
actually, yes, that's right.
Yeah. So it's going to be here at the venue Berlin, and it's going to be on the 16th of June. 16th and 17th of June. And we've got a great lineup of speakers as well, including an Oscar-winning director, some fantastic local developers.
I'm still wondering, how can you say on your hackathon that you're gonna hack emotions? How do you hack emotions? How does that work?
Well, come along on the 16th of June and maybe we'll find out. It's really an open problem, you know. There are different ways to approach it. And this is the exciting thing, that, you know, emotions, you know, is such a subjective thing. And to try and have some kind of artificial intelligence way to approach that is really difficult and really exciting and challenging.
Yeah.
And if I can add to that, so there's a lot of like research in like extracting emotion from text or from like audio as well. So for example, we just did like a hack on hacking emotion, like the venue Berlin at the Media Hack Day. And so like in less than one day, we developed this system that's able to extract emotional information from tweets and then just like to create music on the fly, relying on the Melodrive music engine that fits the emotional context of the tweets that people are just like reading in real time. So there's a lot of like kind of overlap between music, interactive media, and emotion. It's just like a matter of exploring like new things and new possibilities. And now AI, as well as like all of these new breed of technologies, are enabling us to create like these amazing experiences.
That sounds like you're taking all the media together and see what you can make out of it. It's very cool. Where do you see your limits? Do you see any limits? Is there anything that you can't do, or challenges that you're facing right now that you think you might not be able to overcome at this stage?
That's good. Yeah, it's a really interesting question because obviously there are some limits today with all technologies. There's limitations on what you can actually achieve today. So we're limited by things like the capacity of the sound synthesis, like technology that we're using, or the actual games hardware itself, things like this. But things move so fast, especially in the games industry. Things are moving so fast. And even as far back as, say, 15 years ago, you wouldn't have like these amazing adaptive soundtracks that you have today. So, if you imagine in 5-10 years' time, the amount of new exciting things that we'll be able to do could be mind-boggling. Who would have thought that, VR would be so accessible today when the new wave of VR headsets were launched 5-10 years ago? It's really amazing the speed that we're moving at. And the same thing is happening with AI. So with AI, we've had this recent boom in the power of AI and the ability for AI to solve very, very complex problems, and the ability for AI to produce these creative outputs. Who would have thought that we'd get that? Even 5 years ago, we wouldn't have thought that. So it's very, very exciting, the pace that we're going at.
Did you want to add something?
I just wanted to add a thing. So this is very relevant because for example, in AI, for example, neural networks have been there for decades as a technology. So really the technology itself hasn't really changed that much. Of course, there's been improvements, but what's changed right now and the reason we really have machine learning and deep neural networks now is the access to computational power, which has increased exponentially, as well as the access to data. So in a sense, neural networks have been there for a long time, but they weren't used in a real world scenario because there was no enough computational power and there was no enough data to fit to these algorithms. So in this sense, of course, moving forward is not only a matter of having new technologies, but also all the things that are around it. So access to data or access to more powerful hardware. And so all of that is just getting bigger and more powerful day after day almost.
Yeah. And also when you think about the music tech itself, we've undergone such a revolution in music over the last 10 years, or 10, 15 years. And now you have startups like our fellow startup here at the venue Berlin, GrooveCat, who have this amazing, app where you can just share these music moments with each other, really quickly, really simply. They're tapping into a really essential part of human interaction and enabling you to share that. I mean, that's really beautiful, and you wouldn't have thought that you'd be able to do that. So imagine the kind of music that we'd be able to create in the future. It's fantastic.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much for this little interview. Is there anything you guys would like to add or that I didn't ask you and you think it's very crucial to say that in our podcast?
I would just say, thanks to the venue Berlin for inviting us to the podcast again. I just, if anyone's listening who's interested in music tech, has a small startup, then we have a fantastic co-working space here, very collaborative, and you should definitely think about joining the venue Berlin. It's a fantastic place to be.
I'm not sure if we're still free, and it's very hard curated. We got a tough door policy. Just for the ending, there's one last question that we always ask the people that are getting interviewed by us is, what is your favorite track at the moment?
So I was listening to Weezer's cover of Toto Africa. Absolutely loved it. I thought it was fantastic. So I think that's my jam at the moment.
Yeah, and for me, I was listening to some Rachmaninoff. So it was this piano concerto number 2, which is just crazy virtuoso piano music and orchestral music. And it's one of my favorite tracks as well, I would say.
Thank you very much for your time. And also, just a quick note, on the side. Thank you very much for your AI composer to create our little jingle that we have at the beginning and at the end of every podcast that we're doing. Thank you so much. We think it's really cool.
Yeah. It's been great to have like Melodrive taking care of that.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you so much, and see you in the office.
Hello, audio by the Venue Berlin.